Hi everyone, just wanted to give you an update on this week on your quiz and talk to you a little bit about the HIPAA week in general. So there's a couple questions I'm going to give you credit for because honestly I wasn't happy with the question. It's hard when they are in the classroom and one assumes they're accurate, but it's not that they're necessarily inaccurate, they're just not complete. So the first question, I will give everyone credit for this question. A bunch of people got it incorrect, a bunch of people got it correct, but so the question was, where do I get the form to fill out when a breach occurs? The correct answer in the quiz was Federal Trade Commission. So that answer is accurate if you're talking about the FTC breach rule. However, the thing to keep in mind with regard to just in general the breaches and all of that kind of stuff is that there are many different types of privacy and security rules, and there is a Health and Human Services breach rule, and there is a Federal Trade Commission rule, and we talked a little bit about this in the discussion board. So what we had talked about in the discussion board is that the Federal Trade Commission rule is specific to personal health records. So personal health records are not the records that your physician practices have. The personal health records are not the records that hospitals have, long-term care facilities have, home health agencies have. Nobody that is a healthcare provider, insurance agency, or insurance carrier, what's called a clearinghouse, which is the go-between between a provider and an insurer. None of those things are what are known as personal health records. Those types of records. So those are electronic health records. Personal health records are when you actually decide to go out and get yourself a personal health record. So the intent of the electronic health record was so that I could have a record that would go with me, and I'm a good example because I live part of the time in New York, part of the time in Pennsylvania. So the intent of the electronic health record would be that I would have a record that would go with me from New York to Pennsylvania. So if I was seen in an emergency room in upstate New York or an emergency room in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, both of those ER docs would have access to my medical history. But right now, that's not the case. So a personal health record may give them access to that. If I have a personal health record and maybe I carry something that says my personal health record has this and they're able to access it, which not most won't, but if they will, then they are able to access that information. So if that's the case, that personal health record information is what is covered in that FTC, Federal Trade Commission ruling. So the reason they had to create a rule was that because if there was a breach, so if WebMD, and I use WebMD because they're probably one of the larger creators of these personal health records, if WebMD had a huge breach, if there was some kind of a hacker and all of their records were hacked, the HIPAA rules don't apply because they are not what's known as a HIPAA covered entity. So all of that information would just be out there and there would be no ramifications. So the FTC rule was created to protect that information. So there would be some ramifications for that. So the FTC breach rule that we read about was was created so that there would be some ramifications for that type of issue. HIPAA, or the HHS breach notification rule, is the same type of ruling, except on the HIPAA covered entity side. So when there's a breach on the HIPAA side, that's covered through the HHS rules. So they have similar rules, one on the HIPAA side, one on the FTC side, or for the regular, kind of the normal electronic health records. So for that first question, I will be giving people credit. Where do I get the form when a breach occurs? Federal Trade Commission. That only applies for breaches of a personal health record. If it is a breach of a regular electronic health record, that wouldn't be the case. And generally, if there's a breach of an electronic health record, you should be dealing with your entity, not you shouldn't be going to the government first. You should first deal with your own entity. That's only the right thing to do. The second question that I wanted to talk about is, who do you notify if patient information is breached? Again, the answer here is noted as Federal Trade Commission. The other answers are actually completely incorrect. World Health Organization, Joint Commission, the Police Department. Those are all really incorrect. So most people chose Federal Trade Commission because that was the only thing that was potentially accurate. But again, it's not an accurate answer, because in the real world, what happens is you'll actually notify the patient, you'll notify media, you'll notify HHS. It depends on the situation. And if you're a provider, you're not notifying the FTC. That's not part of your that's not part of the situation. So that question is just not accurate. I apologize for that. The next question I want to talk about: when a patient's information has been breached, you should contact them within, and the question here is 60 days and no later. That is accurate based on the information provided. The rest of the answers are kind of nutso. Almost everyone got this correct. So there's not really a situation where we need to correct this. But be aware that there are situations, this is for data breaches. But if you have a situation where you have a serious privacy issue, you probably, from a PR standpoint, you're probably not going to wait 60 days. The law does allow for a certain number of days. Definitely look into HHS rules versus FTC rules, and be sure that you're compliant. But from a PR perspective, if you have a privacy breach versus, we're talking breach notification here, so we're talking about data breaches. That's pretty much what we've talked about here. So there's data breaches, but if you have a privacy issue, make sure that you're meeting the needs of the patient from a privacy issue standpoint. Don't just ignore the fact that there's been a problem from a privacy issue and not let them know for 60 days. That's, from a PR standpoint, that's not an appropriate time frame. It might be okay legally, but again, ethically, probably not appropriate. Next question, and actually these last two, again, some folks got these wrong, but I just wanted to address them quickly. Is a private benefit plan a health plan? It's a yes or no question. Most folks got this correct, but yes, these are health plans. The reason this is a question is because in order to be a HIPAA-covered entity, something has to be a health plan. So this one, as well as the next one, private benefit plans, are health plans. Now, we don't really deal with private benefit plans much anymore. There are very, very few, thanks to the Affordable Care Act. So very, very few private benefit plans, but those that do still exist are considered health plans under HIPAA. And then my last question that a couple people missed is a government-funded program, a health plan. And this is, again, important under HIPAA. It's going to note whether folks are a covered entity under HIPAA. And what I mean by covered entity is, do you have to comply with HIPAA or not? A covered entity means, do you have to comply? Do you have to meet the privacy, security regulations, etc.? So if you're a HIPAA covered entity, that means you have to meet all of those regulations. If you're not a HIPAA covered entity, then obviously you do not. So is a government funded program a health plan? So something like Medicare and Medicaid. So the correct answer in that case was yes. So Medicare and Medicaid, yes, they are absolutely government funded programs. Yes, they are considered health plans. So our correct answer here was yes. So that's our review. But again, probably the biggest thing that I wanted to touch on was that notion of the FTC ruling. Very important. Breach notification is a big deal under FTC, but FTC that applies to personal health records. The HHS breach notification applies to the electronic health records, personal health records, not anything that HIPAA covered entities have. And again, HIPAA covered entities, physician practices, hospitals, long-term care facilities, health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, places that have those personal health records, those are none of those things. So if you have a personal health record, it's going to be through a place like WebMD or something like that. So keep in mind those two things. The FTC ruling does not apply to any of those entities like a hospital, physician practice, something like that. So it's very important to keep that distinction separate. So any questions, let me know, and look forward to working with everyone this week. Thanks so much.